Welcome to the 2012 Freedom of Expression Forum. Today we have John Hemming, British Member of Parliament. And today the subject of what you spoke about in your lecture was the secret courts and the rule of law, the right to petition, and the narrow rights of freedom of expression. And to begin with, my colleague here would like to ask you some questions.
Okay.
Mr. Hemming, in 2011, the so-called Geeksgate aroused a lot of discussion about the super injunctions in the United Kingdom. These super injunctions are meant for keeping certain facts secret in the court as well as in the media. The famous soccer player Ryan Giggs was entitled to a super injunction to hide his relationship with Imogen Thomas. Through the use of Twitter and later through your confirmation, it was disclosed that Giggs was entitled to a super injunction. Could you elaborate on your role and your motivation in this case and your general stance towards super injunction?
Well, A, he didn't have a super injunction. What he had was an injunction. B, he wasn't entitled to it, but in getting it, he prevented Imogen Thomas from obtaining the evidence to prove that he wasn't entitled to it. So there are some factual things that are wrong there. But underlying it all, his lawyers, he's a wealthy man, he was getting his lawyers to prosecute people who'd been tweeting his name. Effectively, much like the lèse majesty law in Thailand, where people can be imprisoned, one person was recently, for laughing and joking about criticising the king. So in England, you're not allowed to criticise a footballer, and I think that's completely wrong. I think that secret prosecutions for contempt of court, there was another one going on which is known by the initials of ZAM, that's going on at the time, to prosecute people in secret and imprison them in secret, are wrong. Right?
I couldn't agree more, personally. In your opinion, is it not possible to arrest everyone who retweeted the message about Ryan Giggs? And if not, why is this? Furthermore, is this mainly to do with the rather uncontrollable nature of the internet and the enormous amount of people who retweeted the message? Or is it a deeper conviction about freedom of expression in general? And to what extent and in what ways must UK legislation be adjusted to deal with new media?
Yeah, I think this is where the judiciary have come up against reality, really. It's important to understand that the changes in privacy law in the UK did not arise from the 1998 Human Rights Act. There were cases in 2003 which were still judged in exactly the same way as traditional UK jurisprudence. The law was changed by the judges sort of around about 2004, 2005, but because not many people were applying for court orders, not many injunctions were given. I'm not sure if the statute law is necessarily wrong. It may be that if this was taken through to the Supreme Court, that the Supreme Court would correct it back to where it used to be, because it was only changed in the High Court. It wasn't changed in the Court of Appeal necessarily, but there is a committee looking at these issues at the moment, and I know some of the members of that committee take the view that we should maintain our freedom of expression rules much the way we've always had them, which is if you don't want to do it, if you don't want it to be on the front page of the newspaper, don't do it. That was the sort of traditional approach, rather than if you don't want it to be on the front page of the newspaper, spend £200,000 and gag everybody, which is the more modern approach. I'm not sure everything modern is good.
I agree. To clarify though, say for example I were looking to get an injunction, would that be possible, or does it require you to have a large amount of money and to be well known?
You don't have to be well known. A large amount of money helps because of the costs of the lawyers, unless you can do the legal work yourself. But then you see your risk also is paying the legal fees on the other side. So these things are not games for ordinary people to get involved in, really. If you look at the situation with Caroline Spellman at the moment, she's trying to do something to protect her son. I don't know exactly the details. I've got some ideas. But let's not bother about that. But the costs are already running about £100,000. That's a lot of money.
Yeah. It's almost enough to buy a house these days.
Well, you can buy a house for £100,000, so it depends where you want to do it.
I'm sure my colleague has some other questions.
Yeah.
You mentioned the cost of cases as well as no fee, no win.
No win, no fee.
No win, no fee. So I'm not British, so I'm not
no
exactly sure
fee, no win is a bit the... Yeah, exactly. The no fee, no win is a sort of pay a lot to the lawyers, and the one who pays the most wins.
How does this relate to social inequality? I mean, the difference in process for those that can afford it
Well,
and those that can't.
I don't know if you know, but the Magna Carta that is in force in the UK law is actually Magna Carta 1297, not 1215. And Article 29 of that says that we will not sell justice. The problem is we're selling justice, and the people with the deepest pockets very often win, not because of the law, so much of costs risk.
Fair enough.
That's not social justice. It's not in accordance with the Magna Carta.
Why does this exist in a society that fought so hard for the rights of the people?
In what sense?
For example, the Magna Carta you just mentioned.
I think it's, well, the Magna Carta was a thing to do with the barons anyway, really, but it wasn't about everybody's rights. It was the right of the barons to have fair treatment amongst themselves. The Bill of Rights was much more important in that sense. But
And that was in 1689?
or 88, whichever way you
okay.
want to look at it. It's obviously the question of when it was signed, and it's a very complex thing because it's not standard statute law. It is really, in a sense, we had a revolution then. We had a new constitution, and that was the Bill of Rights. But I think there has been a lack of attention to how the legal system operates, and perhaps one of the things that the injunctions debate, privacy injunctions debate, has helped with is to give a bit more attention on the issue of how the legal system operates, because obviously people are aware of it anyway, but I think the costs issues have been around for some time.
Can you elaborate on the problematic relationship between class and power in the United Kingdom, and whether cultural diplomacy can help in this?
Well, it's not class and power, but wealth and power. So, like, basically, if people have got a lot more money, then there's always going to be an element to which if you've got more money, you're in a stronger position. But the legal system really doesn't do that good a job for people who haven't got much money, and that's notwithstanding changes to legal aid. The legal aid system doesn't work very well, even before the changes that are going through at the moment.
Speaking of secret prisons, can you explain a little bit the role of the British government in helping the CIA run the secret prisons?
You're talking here about. The secret prisoners that I refer to are people imprisoned in England,
yes,
with reporting restrictions.
Yeah.
There are also issues about the people imprisoned abroad through sort of the war on terror saga and people imprisoned in other countries.
There was an allegation that the Glasgow Prestwich Airport in the UK was involved in transferring prisoners.
Yeah, this is extraordinary rendition, as it's talked about. That's not an area I've studied at great length. Obviously, the principles that apply domestically should apply internationally as well.
Yeah. But as a member of Parliament, what is your opinion on the government's role?
Well, I think the government's behaved very badly. I think you've got to be careful, because if you're in an asymmetric conflict, which is what you've got, it's about emotions and people's emotional dramas. And so if you wind people up so they want to commit suicide when bombing somebody, you know what I mean? The point about suicide bombing is it's not really a rational behaviour. It's a sort of striking out that just creates anger on all sides, and it's sort of a tribal retaliation mechanism, if you see what I mean. So when you start doing unjust things, you start stimulating the emotional desire for revenge, and it's about vengeful assaults. So it is a mistake to think that things like Guantanamo Bay actually benefit things, because it's not just the people in Guantanamo Bay you have to concern yourself with. You have to concern yourself with everybody else who then perceives what's going on, considers that to be unjust, and then desires revenge. Emotionally, not rationally.
Yeah, of course. I want to ask a question about British foreign policy, if that's okay.
I don't mind. You can ask any questions you want.
Britain's involvement in Libya, it's been accused as being double-sided, because now the provisional government's been accused of war crimes. There was a recent massacre in a refugee camp, and just today it was broken that black Africans were held in prison in Guantanamo style, and they were forced to.
Well, they shouldn't be done. The standards should be the same. It's not. The reason for the UN involvement in Libya was the likely chance that Gaddafi would go around basically taking out, was it Benghazi? That was the second Benghazi, wasn't it? The second city.
Yes. And
killing a lot of people there, and his track record in doing that gave good evidence for that, and it was done in accordance with the rule of law and everything like that. Now, we want to see the the new regime follow international standards just as much as the old regime. When they killed Gaddafi himself, that was not in accordance with the rule of law. That was just an extrajudicial killing. So it was, you know, and if much that, you know, I wouldn't suggest we invade Libya again.
But what could the British government do to restrict?
Well, there is always one of the things I think was discussed. No, yesterday was it? One of the things that's always a good idea is to explain to people why you think they're doing something wrong, what it is they're doing wrong, and what you'd like to see them do instead. Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
But it does get difficult when it comes out of a war situation where, you know, people go around killing each other, to just suddenly get everything perfect from day one. But you should. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try. But you've actually got, you have to recognise the angers are there. So there's a desire for revenge, but you need to encourage people not to take it out on each other in an extrajudicial manner.
What is the role that cultural diplomacy can play into this?
What's the role?
Conflict?
Well, it is this issue about, you know, human rights at the end of the day and arguing the case for them.
Okay, fair enough. How would you respond to the criticism that from Russia and China that the West overstepped its boundaries under the UN resolution?
I haven't looked at the details of their criticism and the details of the the West's response, so I don't want to answer that without looking at it.
Okay, fair enough. And one last question. Roger Waters, the member of Pink Floyd, he came out criticizing the British government, saying he was ashamed of his country for its role in the Falklands.
Yeah.
And in terms of neo-colonialism. And recently, actually, I think it was sometime this month, the foreign minister of Argentina, Hector Timerman, accused the UK of deploying a Vanguard-class submarine to the region, and it's creating strains between it. Can you elaborate on further on the position of the government?
Well, I think you have to look at the history of the Falklands. And, okay, I don't know how far you go back, but clearly, in terms of the lifetime of everybody who's living there, they wanted to be effectively under the protection of the UK, not in Argentina. They have a right to self-determination, and I support their right. And I don't care what Pink Floyd's are. I can play music as well. That doesn't make me any better as a politician.
Now with the current global economic crisis, if there was to be another problem with Argentina, is Britain in a position to even do anything about it?
Well, yeah, that's why they sent a Vanguard style. You know, there's a destroyer being sent out and all sorts of things. So obviously, yes.
But one destroyer and one submarine is nothing compared to the fleet that it sent, where the newspaper said the Empire struck back.
Yeah, I think that one of the mistakes that was made in the 1980s was to give a sign thinking that the UK didn't care. Mm-hmm. Right? And actually, at the time, the government withdrew, it's a long time ago, and obviously there was a ship that was patrolling the area that was withdrawn.
Okay.
And that made the Argentinians think that we didn't care, and we do.